Luke, thanks for talking to me today.
Hi Joe, nice to meet
you. What would you like to talk about?
I'm going to talk about living in London and the kind of love-hate relationship I have with it, and I assume most people do. I've been living in London for about 15 years, maybe a bit longer, and I've lived kind of mostly in kind of North and East London. So I moved to Camden originally, and now I live in Hackney, which is probably the kind of trendiest area of London, and that's not necessarily why I live there, but it's a nice area of London. And most people that come to London and visit London think that central London is London, but where generally people don't live in central London, and people don't spend too much time in central London. They might work there, but they don't visit there. So you might come to London as a tourist and go to somewhere like Leicester Square, Trafalgar Square, Oxford Street, Regent Street, that kind of area, and I'm very rarely in that area. So I live slightly on the outskirts, but it's not really on the outskirts because it's kind of zone 2, zone 3, which for most people that live in London, that's quite close to the centre. So it takes me about half an hour to get into town. And when you live in London, you say town as in central London. And things I love about London is that I've got 2 children that live in London. Well, my oldest is 9, and there's so many things to do constantly, and so many events every weekend. You can go somewhere like the South Bank, and there's always something happening throughout the year. You can always go to the theatre, you can go to the cinema. There's amazing restaurants and cafes. There's lots of things to experience, but there's also... But the downside is there's a kind of lack of stillness and quietness that you might get if you live outside of the city. But of course, you can always go to royal parks, which are amazing. I think my favourite thing about living in London is the kind of... Well, where I live particularly, there's a bit of a local community. It's kind of like a small village. It's called Stoke Newington, which everyone that lives in London's heard of, but tourists haven't necessarily heard of. And it's actually quite a nice place to visit.
What's the worst thing about living in London for you?
The underground's pretty horrific. And what I find is I used to come out to London when my dad worked in London when I was a kid, sort of 20, 30 years ago, maybe even longer. And there was rush hour, and rush hour was the morning and the evening or the early afternoon. And now London is just one constant rush hour. It doesn't matter what time you get on the tube or what time you get a bus, it's packed. It's always packed, and if you drive in London as well, it's the same thing. It just takes forever to get anywhere. So the worst thing is how busy it is. It's hectic.
Okay, thanks so much for talking to me.
Pleasure.
Hello, Luis.
Hello.
Would you like to tell us about marathon running? Because I know that you've started running marathons recently. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, yes, I started to run like I think like 14 or 15 years ago when I quit smoking. At the beginning, I should run like a kilometer or 2, little by little, because I didn't have any ambition or desire to run much. It just was to do a bit of exercise to help my quitting of smoking. But little by little I start to like it, and then I start to run a little bit more time, do more kilometers. And the thing that the big change became when I bought a watch. These kind of watches with that measure the distance and the speed. After that, you try to get better, to do more kilometers, to do more time, and so on. Until I reach a form that allowed me to do a half marathon. This was my first race, was a half marathon, and I saw that I could do a half marathon, and then little by little I thought that why not to try a marathon, and that was 2 years ago that I did my first marathon. That was from Girona to La Costa Brava, Platja d'Aro.
And have you done any more marathons since the first one?
Oh yeah, this year I did the Barcelona marathon, which went at the beginning quite well, because I beat my best time for half marathon, which was like an hour and 40 minutes, and I did in the Barcelona marathon an hour and 31 minutes, which is quite good for a man of my age, which I'm 48, and I'm not a professional runner or anything like that, so it's quite a good time for me, I think. But then at the end, it was a very hot day. Maybe I didn't drink enough or something. At the kilometer 40, when there was only 2 kilometers left, I felt dizzy, and suddenly I find myself on the ground. I just my legs were weak, and I felt down, and they had to help me out and sit me on a chair, and they brought me some water and some food, and so at the end the timing wasn't so good.
But you did finish the marathon.
Yes, I did finish the marathon, but not with the time that I wanted to do, which was 3 hours and 15. So it was 3 hours and 35 minutes, which is not the 20 minutes more that I wanted to do, but it was still, all right.
Okay, well, congratulations. Thanks for telling us about it. Hi, Ella.
Hello.
Thanks for talking to me today. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I love music, so I'd like to talk about music.
Fantastic.
As you might be able to tell, my accent isn't from the UK. I was born in Canada, but I live in Manchester now, and I'm so happy that I do, because I love the music scene there. It's really interesting, the history that's come from the acid house movement, through bands like Happy Mondays, the Dylans, through a culture of clubbing that came from the Hacienda, has now left this really cool community of artists of all different genres who still gig and perform there in Manchester. It's really cool hanging out in the northern quarter. It was an area that used to be mills back in the industrial era of Manchester, but now it's turned into coffee shops and clubs and restaurants.
Cool. And do you make music yourself?
Yes, I play guitar and piano, and I sing. And getting to play with the other musicians there has introduced me to playing a lot more electronic instruments as well, like drum sequencers, playing with Ableton, and playing with DJs. What's really interesting about Manchester is the musicians in Manchester focus a lot more on what they love to make than, in my opinion, musicians in London. Musicians in Manchester really like to focus in on the time they spend in a studio and the time they spend creating, forming smaller and smaller communities to hone into a weird or specific sound, whereas in London, people are a lot more out and about, and they like performing and socializing and being around each other.
Do you think you'll stay living in Manchester for a long time, or are you planning to go back to Canada?
I really like Manchester. I think I'll stay there because the smaller population has meant that the community is a lot more connected, and we see each other by circumstance a lot more frequently. So yes, I would like to stay in Manchester.
Great. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
Thanks for talking to me today. What would you like to talk about?
Today I was going to talk about music and how it's changed in terms of distribution and influence on social media in today's generation.
Great.
So I'm a big fan of music. I grew up listening to it on the radio, my mum's old CDs in the car. And it's funny how growing up you see how in today's digital age and generation how music is distributed and shared. When I was young and when my parents were young, you'd only ever hear music on the radio or on the television on top of the pops. But nowadays, music gets shared around all the time on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram. As an artist myself, I found it really interesting how songs are going viral and acts are breaking, not from a prime slot on a television show, but just by music gaining heat online, getting shared around, and numbers exponentially growing. It's also made things very difficult because the pool's so much bigger now, everybody's doing it. But equally, you could have a hit in your bedroom, many people, many artists are. They have one song that goes online, a DJ ends up playing it in the club, and it goes viral overnight. And it's and a lot of people are making a career that way, which I just find really interesting. As a musician myself, I'm making a lot more of my music from a home studio because it's more accessible for a lot more people now.
Do you think the changes are for the better or for the worse?
I'm interested to see how it goes. I think in many ways it's a good thing because it opens lots of doors to many people that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford studio time and being able to get their creativity in the best possible format it can be. But equally, I think there are negatives to it because the opportunities are getting less and less, and people's interests and hopes for instant gratification are having a detrimental effect on the ability of making new music. There's not much time given to be able to really make your craft and sonically engage in an audience because you don't have their attention long enough for them to really listen and invest in your development.
Right. And which is your favourite platform for putting your music out?
My favourite platform is YouTube because that's where the most of my subscribers are. And what I do is every week on my channel I put out covers of my most favourite songs of the most famous artists of the songs that are doing really well. So that's how I'm able to garner more fans and subscribers over to my channel so they can hear more of my music, and through that they're able to hear my original music as well.
Do you want to mention the name of your channels in case our listeners want to subscribe?
Sure. My channel's called Jordan Clark 500. It's
Clark with an E?
Yes, it's right. Jordan Clark with an E 500. You'll find covers and some original material on there, and you can find out more about me. So yeah, please check it out.
Great. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Thank you.
Hello, Melissa.
Hello, Joanna.
What would you like to tell us about today?
I would like to tell you about the organisation, which is called the Hypatia Trust, located in Penzance in Cornwall, that I founded in 1996. It is allied to Exeter University, and it is an institute which encourages lifelong learning for women. We concentrate on women's lives, both their careers and their family life, and virtually anything which they have accomplished, which often in history is swept over or sort of edited out of normal histories.
Do you want to tell me about some of the projects that the Hypatia Trust has been involved in?
Yes, I would like to. We have, for example, we have a Wikipedia group which spend a lot of time and effort in their own homes working on the entries for women on the net, on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
This is very helpful because very often men forget that that women are there when they're talking about their lives and their achievements. This is one project. We also have art exhibitions of women's art, craft. That might be sewing, it might be needlework, it might be needlework, or it could be painting, or any sculpture, that sort of thing. And we also have lectures where women who have climbed Everest or done something else remarkable will come and tell us about the experience. We have some very fine offices with meeting rooms that the community can also use for their projects. Altogether, we are a kind of a community centre, but basically we are a women's learning institute, and we promote anything which leads to lifelong learning
For women.
for women.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Though we don't disinvite men attending because they need to learn as well.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
I want to talk about my life in UK. I went to study in the UK a few years ago. The most exciting experience is that I went to a host family for my Christmas holiday in December. I went there alone on a train. It took me about 1 or 2 hours to get there to York, and then I stayed there for 1 week. This was the first time that I spent time with a UK family, which I learned a lot from them. They treat me like a family member. They took me out to eat, to play, and to see all the different interesting culture of the region. On Christmas Day, they even bought me some presents to celebrate the Christmas. When I went back to Oxford, which was the place that I stayed for that year, I had the chance to teach in a Chinese school every Sunday. The kids are about 14 years old, and I taught them Chinese. They were very cute, but they all speak in English. I spent lots of time to encourage them to speak in Cantonese. During my study in the UK, I lived with few other students from different countries. They're very nice, and we used to cook on our own, just like a big family. Every day we went to supermarkets to buy food and drinks and desserts. We cooked every day. I was not a good cook. Normally I just put everything in the oven, and I've tried to bake a cake before but failed, and they all laughed at me. And every time when I bake a cake, they never taste it. We share a flat together with shared kitchen, bathrooms, but we do have our own sink and bedroom. The life in the UK is quite relaxing besides study, because you can explore more and do different activities at school, or even some other extracurricular activities. After I come back Hong Kong, I still keep in touch with all my friends in the UK from different countries like Italy, Malaysia, Japan, UK, and other countries. Sometimes we even send email to each other, and sometimes they may come to Hong Kong to visit, and we will meet each other again. I really enjoy the time in the UK. I hope you will also have the chance to explore more in other different countries in the future.
Hi Joe.
Hello.
Thank you for talking to me today. What would you like to talk about?
So I'm going to tell you about my recent visit to a very well-known restaurant and very special restaurant.
Okay, great.
It's called Al Sierra Can Roca, and it's in Girona in Spain. And it often comes in the top 2 or 3 restaurants in the world. And I went last week, and well, the first thing that was exciting for us was to even get a table, because we booked a year ago, and we had to go. You have to go because you can book a year in advance, so you have to go online at 1 minute to midnight a year before you think you could go, and keep refreshing the page until places become available and just go immediately and get the table. So we were really excited to have the table, and we were kind of nervous on Friday because we waited a whole year, so expectations were really high. And it was also by chance boiling hot in Girona, and it was in the middle of a heat wave. It was 44 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
So we were just waiting in our hotel room. We couldn't go outside because it was too hot, kind of wondering what this dinner was going to be like, and getting all dressed up. So we went, and the place is beautiful. I thought it would be quite. It didn't really feel formal, though. The staff were all really friendly, and they showed us the kitchen first, and it's amazing because no one is stressed in the kitchen, or they did a good job of pretending that they weren't. And they were making amazing things. It looked like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for adults. All these little olive trees with amazing olive kind of confections hanging from them. And the whole thing was amazing. A once in the lifetime experience of lots of different courses of tiny, beautiful, surprising things.
What was the best dish?
It was all amazing, but I think the best thing for me was one of the desserts. I had a sheep themed pudding.
Wow.
So it was all. So it was like a woolly sheep. It was like candy floss, made with sort of white sugar, like you have at the fair, and that was supposed to represent the wool. And the sound of the spoon on the bowl made the sound of the bell on the sheep in the field. And then separately, I had this thing to smell that smelt of wool. So I was eating this sheep wool and smelling the smell of wool at the same time, which it sounds really weird, but it was actually delicious.
Sounds incredible.
It really was amazing.
Wow, thank you for telling us about it.
It's a pleasure.
Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Joe.
What would you like to talk about today?
I thought I'd just say a little bit about the importance of trying to keep your body fit when you're getting older. I had my blood pressure was getting higher, and the doctor was saying it was getting close to needing medication to improve it. And I said to him, I think I'd rather not have the medication, but I will try and take more exercise. So I had to find some form of exercise which was enjoyable and which would also keep me fitter. So I chose to take up playing tennis. I'm quite good at hitting a ball or catching a ball, so that wasn't any problem. And I get very bored if I just go running. But tennis has the advantage that you have a ball to chase around for an hour. You're stopping and starting. And it also has a very good social aspect to it, where you join a club and you meet lots of other people who are, a lot of them, the same age as you. You soon find some friends to play with, and you can go and play a game regularly, and then afterwards have a cup of coffee and a conversation with people. So it gets you out of the house, meeting other people. And I think it has a whole lot of advantages, and it's certainly worked for me, because I started playing regularly about 8 or 9 years ago, and I have never needed to have any medication for my blood pressure. In fact, my blood pressure now is lower and more healthy than it was before I started playing. I really just got rather lazy. I used to take exercise and play. I used to play squash and other games when I was younger, but then I got lazy, my knees got a bit creaky, and I stopped playing anything until I took up tennis. And I think really it's transformed my life. I'm so much fitter than I was 8 years ago. I feel healthier for it. I've made a lot of new friends who I have a lot of fun with, and I think it has tremendous benefits.
Great. How old were you, may I ask, when you started playing tennis?
I think I was in my early 60s. I was probably about 63, between 60 and 65, and I'm now 72. And my tennis in that time has improved a lot. Where I have a friend who is a retired tennis professional who I play with quite a lot, and he's given me quite a few tips on how to improve my tennis. And now I even occasionally get invited to play by some of the better players in the tennis club, which I think is rather good. It improves my morale as well as my fitness.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I've lived in many different countries, both in Western Europe, the Middle East, and now here in Hong Kong. And during all of that time, I've learned 5 or 6 different languages to one degree or another. I love learning languages. Not only are they important when you move to a country, I just find them fascinating. Before I came to Hong Kong, I lived in Barcelona, Spain for 10 years. And when I first arrived, the most important thing was being able to communicate with people locally. I don't attend classes. I don't think I'm particularly good in classes. I prefer to learn by just talking to people, finding out what I need to say by looking at dictionaries and listening carefully. Other things that helped me when I first moved to Spain were watching the typical kinds of programs we see every day on channels around the world. For example, the weather. This is great because they always say the same things, so you can really quickly hear the same words repeated again and again, and the pictures help, of course. Other types of program that helped me learn Spanish quickly were things like game shows, where the same thing happens. They have a catchphrase or a slogan that they repeat endlessly when contestants win or when they're called to compete. As well as that, I used to pick up the Spanish newspapers. First of all, I just accepted there was no way I was going to understand anything but 1 or 2 words. But gradually, I found that I learned lots of new things about this. I was interested because I wanted to know what was happening in the country I lived in. But I also knew that I could learn a lot of language this way, so I'd take a dictionary with me sometimes, or I'd notice a word and I'd ask other people what they said, what it meant. Anyway, by far the best practice I ever had was just talking to people in the street or in shops, where I'd rehearse in my head what I wanted to say beforehand before I went in, Usually, I made a right mess of it first of all, but after you get over the embarrassment, it's quite funny really, and people are very sympathetic and supporting in most cases. It took me a long time to develop a good level of Spanish. I lived there for 10 years, and I think I'm very fluent now. But I think for the first 2 years that I was there, it was quite a struggle to hold a decent conversation. There were always lots of words and expressions that I didn't pick up on. In particular were the colloquial expressions, idioms, that kind of thing, that people use in everyday talk, but you don't necessarily see written down. I didn't find those very easy to learn at all. But it was a lot of fun, and people, as I said, are really supporting when they know that you're genuinely interested in learning their language.